Handlock is named aptly after the fact that it wants to hold a big hand. Usually its turn 2 and turn 3 are tap, so that on turn 4 you can play one of Twilight Drake or Mountain Giant. The play is a little bit different going first or second. The game plan of Handlock is generally stall in the early game, Coil, Chow, Dark Bomb, Ooze, Watchers, and Sun Furies. These are all early game cards, which you try to stall so you don't lose health that fast. You have Board Clears and Hellfire and Shadow Flame. Once it gets to the later game, you're going to have your Twilight Drakes out, which have a lot of health. Hopefully your Giants out. In some matches you cannot actually play Mountain Giant. And then you taunt those up. Against aggressive decks, they have to watch out to manipulate your health, because otherwise you can come right back into the game with Molten Giant, Sun Fury, or Molten Defender of Argus. This is a very control heavy deck, and since you're life tapping so much in the early game, you often get a very good roadmap of what's going to happen throughout the game. And your cards tend to be of very strong value. The tricky part is generally staying alive.
You asked for it.
Your soul shall be mine.
Whether or not to keep the Mountain Giant depends strongly based on what class you get matched up against. Against classes which you think you're going to die very quickly, Mage and Hunter are the two that come to mind as the two classes that I would get rid of Mountain Giant against. You want to get rid of Mountain Giant. Against all the other classes, you're generally going to go for a tap Giant play. Worth mentioning, since I'm going second, if you go tap, you will end up overdrawing a card, which means when you're going second, you need to tap and then play a card somewhere in between, like a Ancient Watcher, and then you can just play the Mountain Giant on 4. There have been some versions of this deck which have decided to run the Void Callers and some demons like Jaraxxus and Mal'Ganis, and I think that's also a valid way to go. And there are some decks that go more early game with 2 Chow and 2 Dark Bomb if you hate aggro, and then there are some which go the other way, which cut the zombie Chow and maybe cut in Coil and then add in more late game cards like Ragnaros. Looks like opponent is a Freeze Mage based on the Fire Blast on me. Freeze Mage is a really bad matchup because usually you're hoping when you're low that you can go Molten, and then Taunt. But Freeze Mage doesn't care about your taunt. This is actually a bad Tempo Mage opening, so that's really good. The good news about the Tempo Mage matchup is the mirror entities have a lot of ways of getting triggered. For example, Ancient Watcher, which will often fizzle them, make them very ineffective. I needed to play this first because oftentimes they also run Counterspell, so I had to check. Make sure my Coil had gone through. If I had played Ancient Watcher and no secret had triggered, I would have then played the coin in order to trigger Counterspell, and then done Coil.
I'll show them. I'll show them all.
There are two main choices here. One is Twilight Drake Coin Dark Bomb, and the other is Sludge Belcher. The bad news about Twilight Drake Coin Dark Bomb is looking ahead to turn 6. That would mean the turn 6 play would probably be Sludge Belcher, which would be a little bit off curve. But this is just too big a threat, I'd say. Oftentimes in hand luck, you have to give a balance. And by the way, the coin is really good. I would encourage holding onto it if possible until you have a turn which uses it well. There's all sorts of cool things you can do with the coin. My favorite thing is in a control matchup, you get to do Jiraxxus coin hero ability. How convenient. Play it first before activating the secret. This is the strength of hand luck, to be able to... Oh, no secret. That means the mirror entity is in the mage's hand. And maybe a counterspell also.
I'll show them. I'll show them all.
This is the strength of hand luck, to be able to play some very, very strong cards far cheaper than they should be. Like this is a 4/5, for example, for 2 mana. Of course, it just sits around, but hand luck's defensive nature. Speaking of hand luck's defensive nature, you pretty much are aiming to just survive, and you're willing to sacrifice a lot of damage in order to clear the board. No secret popped out the first time, so happy to check this first. And we'll need to check for the mirror entity, so here's another Ancient Watcher. Knock yourself out. Tricky thing about the anti-kill bots is oftentimes you have to play a little bit. You have to realize how much burst the damage, how much burst the opponent can do in terms of damage. Make sure to leave yourself at a life total where you won't die. The longer you can wait on playing anti-kill bot, the cheaper the Molten Giant will be. I should have Worldly Blade something for +1. Oh well.
I serve the Fire Lord.
So this particular matchup was a lot easier because I had the Ancient Watchers to trigger into his mirror entities. Also good is the Zombie Chow into those. The Druid matchup is one in which Mountain Giant on turn 4 is a real possibility. Against an aggressive deck, you would want to keep Zombie Chow. However, in this matchup, when you're going first, you cannot play Zombie Chow on turn 1. Unless you're up against an aggressive deck and you plan on contesting them with cards like Zombie Chow and the Ancient Watcher. Like, if it was Hunter, I'd absolutely keep Zombie Chow. But against Druid, the game plan is simple. Turn 2 tap, turn 3 tap, turn 4. Hopefully I have a Mountain Giant or a Twilight Drake. And your odds of having the Twilight Drake or the Mountain Giant on turn 4 are rather high, since you go through your first 3 cards in a mulligan, and then you draw 3 more ones, and by the turn you get to turn 4, you're supposed to have like 9 cards in hand. But sometimes you don't get the Twilight Drake or the Mountain Giant. Consider that unfortunate. You can still win from there. It's harder though. At least with this hand, if I don't draw a 4-drop, Mountain Giant, Twilight Drake, then I can go Ancient Watcher and tap. But obviously a setback if I don't get one. And this will go into turn 5 Sludge Belcher, and then hopefully by turn 6 I'll actually have something. There's some good news and some bad news. The Molten Giants are difficult to use against Druid because they can just combo you from the health. So actually there's very little good news right here.
I have no time for games.
The Sludge Belcher trades badly against Sylvanas also. That's some amount of good news.
Where shall I strike?
That'll slow him down a bit. And also, it's not too poor if Sylvanas ends up stealing any of these. So here it is possible to Shadow Flame one. I'm actually going to go for Sludge Belcher though. The Shadow Flame isn't quite good enough, and I want to wait for more somehow before doing so. Tap would be good, but I don't have enough cards to hold in my hand. The problem with Shadow Flame is you guarantee that he steals a 4/5, but if you wait, and handlock, you often have to be patient and wait. If you wait, then it's possible that Shadow Flame will be able to Shadow Flame your last minion, and then Sylvanas steals nothing. It's kind of an unfortunate game, since the Twilight Drakes or Mountain Giants graced us with their presence on turn 4. Furthermore, an Owl would be pretty good on Sylvanas. Druid's keeping their Sylvanas. It's an L. That's some good news. One of the things to this deck isn't really for the faint of heart, because oftentimes you have to tap when you may not feel comfortable tapping, but tapping is leading you towards victory in two ways. One, you often do need the cards. Two, every single tap is like drawing an additional Phantom Innervate from Molten Giants. Aha, finally. So, it is important to always consider just how much damage your opponent can do before tapping. Here in the case of Savage Roar, he will have 3, 5, 7, 9, 11 damage. In the case of Force of Nature, that would be also 11 damage. In the case of some combination of like a Druid's Claw and Charge form and a Savage Roar, you lose the game. But that's no reason to panic and do something like Twilight Drake, Zombie Chow, Sun Fury, because that Sun Fury is required for the Molten Giants. Therefore, this is one of those places where you have to have the fortitude to just realize, okay, I'm going to play this and this, and I have 2 mana left, so I'm going to tap. And I'll actually play this and this over that. You accept that sometimes you lose here, but in the case where you don't, you get to go Molten, Sun Fury.
Where shall I strike?
That's unfortunate, but the tap changed nothing in terms of damage, and playing the Sun Fury on just this is too weak. He can play a Keeper, for example, on the Twilight Drake, and just bypass that, and then you wouldn't have anything from Moltens. So that is how you play this matchup. Unfortunate that he had exactly those 2 cards there, but be brave, and don't let the fact that you sometimes lose those haunt you.
Victory or death! Your soul shall be mine!
Warlock against Warrior is one of my personal favorite matchups. And probably should be any Handlock's favorite matchup, because it just matches up so well. Your hero ability draws cards, their hero ability just armors up, which you don't really care about, unless they're specifically drawing into like a shield slam. In this case, I've got the perfect setup. You just generally run them out of threats. If they're Patron Warrior, you have the perfect tools to deal with them, with Hellfire, with Shadow Flame, with giant things which you taunt up. And if they're Control Warrior, you simply out-card them. Oftentimes, your cards will require at least 1 card on their side. And furthermore, you're always tapping so much. So the ideal draw has happened here. It's turn 4. Mountain Giant or Twilight Drake into turn 5. This will cost 4, but you can actually tap and then play the Mountain Giant, and it'll cost 1 less, and it's really good. So Twilight Drake, tap Giant into something else that's on curve tends to be best. One thing to watch out against Warrior, and I don't know whether this is Control Warrior or not yet, but the armor can be used to shield slam. So I'm going to go ahead and hit him so that he can't do armor up, shield slam this, or he can't do shield block into shield slam the giant. Furthermore, it doesn't seem to matter that much that this 2/2 exists currently. I'll go ahead and coil.
Job's done.
And when you're just laying out these 4 mana 4/9s and 3 mana 8/8s, you feel like life's pretty good against the Warrior. It's pretty desperate, and it's a good thing that the armor was removed the last turn. One of the things to watch out for is Brawl, which it appears he doesn't have. He also appears to not have Execute. So I'll just keep on the pressure. If this were to get into the late game, which it looks like it won't, Lord Jaraxxus provides a lot of value. Every single turn where they have to slog through Infernos is a huge gain for you. In this matchup specifically, try to save the anti-kill bots to be played right after Alex Straza is played. I don't think I have lethal yet. It's like 1 damage off.
So many
With the Hellfire, yep. So I'll tap in Sylvanas. In the late game, you just really want to get into the rhythm of tap and then play a card, tap and then play a card.
I have no time for games.
Oh, I actually missed lethal with Hellfire, Defender of Argus there. Mistake. I thought I was 1 off. But supposing that you don't actually have lethal there, you want to get into the rhythm of tap big guy, or just tap guy, and then you eventually wear them down. It's like when you're a math teacher and you make like some kind of mistake, and then like a student's like, "Wait, but Mr. Trump shouldn't that be a negative sign since you multiplied by a negative?" I'm like, "Oh, right. I guess I have to erase the entire problem." And scumbags.